I'm Barbara Lee Diamonstein, and welcome to Interior Design, The New Freedom. Today we'll be talking to the celebrated designer Ward Bennett. At various times he's been a fashion illustrator and designer, a sculptor, a jewelry and tableware designer, and an influential teacher. For the last 30 years, we've known him best as the distinguished designer of interiors and their furnishings. Ward, how did you come to excel in so many areas of design?
Well, as you know, I left home when I was very young, and I got my first job in New York as a shipping clerk in the fabric business, ladies' garment fabrics. And I worked at that profession for about a year. And at the same time, being exposed to designers, naturally I became interested. My nature goes in that direction. And,
you meant that you left home when you were very young. Your formal education ended when you left school.
Grammar school. Yeah.
And home at the age of 13.
Right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
How and where did you live?
Well, I lived at 124th Street and Broadway in a furnished room. And I worked as a shipping clerk and delivery boy for a firm called Chin Chin Crepe.
What did you do for the Chin Chins?
I delivered and wrapped the fabrics. And
hand delivery?
Oh yes, in a truck. Yes, and in fact, one of my most harrowing experiences in my life was delivering a whole truckload. That's just a two-wheel truck.
A hand cart.
That's right.
The kind that is still used on 7th Avenue?
Exactly, with loaded with bolts of fabric. And I was going to B Cone at 29th Street in Madison.
Is that lingerie?
Mm-hmm. And trying to get up onto the sidewalk on the southeast corner of 33rd Street, it went over.
Do you still pass there and cringe?
Yep. I mean, everyone out of every building was
Well, I assume that was a
me.
brief job. Was that the end of the job,
That
too?
was the end of the job, yes.
And where did you go from there?
Well, I had taken these 8 or 10 lessons from a woman called Madame Jeanette, who taught fashion sketching.
What gave you the idea to do that?
Well, having met designers in this profession where I was delivering the fabrics, naturally I wanted to do it too. And so I walked up to Saks and I spoke to a woman who I years later worked for at I. Magnus in San Francisco, Mademoiselle de Claire, and I showed her my drawings and she thought they were interesting. And then I got my first job at about 50 and a half on my own as a designer, full-time designer.
To design what?
Well, it was called Joanne Jr. and owned by Zinn Brothers, and I designed fashions, the whole collection. And at 16 or 16 and a half, something like that, they sent me to Europe to see the collection.
And what did you discover while there? I think you discovered enough to remain.
No, I came back and I was not recognizable. I went over on the Queen Mary and came back on the Normandy, and I came back with a mustache, a trench coat, a pork pie hat, riding breeches, and an English accent.
So here you are, the English Ward Bennett. And what did you do then?
I worked on Lady in the Dark. I did the clothes for that.
In the Gertrude Lawrence version?
Exactly.
And you did her costume?
Mm-hmm. And several others.
What did she wear?
All the costumes of the show?
Well, what were they like?
Oh, one of the most famous ones was a little sequin vest. I remember that very well. Danny Kaye was in that. Now, we did all her personal costumes, but Hattie Carnegie was known at that time. See, Norell was working there, too.
You kept on defining your life more and more at that point in time as an artist, and you moved from illustration to art to sculpting.
At the same time, I was working with Hoffman, I believe, and also started to sculpt. I introduced the clients to art.
I think you should tell us who the clients were.
Well, their name is Jason, and she was my sister-in-law's sister. And they had a lot of monies, and they had this penthouse at 945 Fifth Avenue. They were not familiar with the arts, and as I had been studying with Hoffman, and had bought my first Picasso drawings, even at that time, for $75 a piece, that I was able to create and helping them and guide them to buy very important paintings.
And an African art collection as well.
African art, but Picasso's and Leger and Miro and all the way down the line. Things that were just beginning, and clay.
What did the interior furnishings look like in that first apartment?
Not dissimilar to what I'm doing today. It was a 2-bedroom apartment and a maid's room, dining room, living room, and a terrace on Fifth Avenue. The most important thing, and I still feel that, this is the architecture. It's the planning of the space, the actual circulation of the space, your utilities, kitchen, baths, storage, lighting. Furniture is secondary. I did take the terrace and do a greenhouse on it. There was even larger terrace. So and Oak took the windows out of the living room.
A glass greenhouse.
A glass greenhouse. And they made the choices. Really beautiful things. And that was the beginning of it, to giving it a personality, that it was a meaningful place. And I wouldn't live there. It wasn't for me. It was too elegant, too dressy, too formal. I mean, I think we had a yellow damask bedspread with a Scalamonde fringe around it in a very modern room, and white glass shoji sliding into the walls overlooking the park, and a wall of mirror which was dressing room, 3-way mirror, and so forth. Exactly what the lady of the house needs would be.
What problems in particular were presented to you for this very first job? With whatever your good intent and your good taste, there was very little experience that went with it.
Well, don't forget, I had done window display for years. You see, it's all linked on lighting, working with objects every 10 days to do 10 windows. So it's all linked up. I did work at, sculpting and painting, and I made jewelry. I showed my jewelry either a little earlier or before at the Museum of Modern Art. And while I was working at the Clay Club down there, I showed at the Whitney Annual. So I was working in various materials. And also associating at this time always with interesting people. I didn't have an education, but still my education came through my environment. So at that time when I was studying with Hoffman, I stayed in his house for 2 summers.
What was the particular influence that Hoffman had on you and your work? Particularly one associates Hoffman with a very striking palette. And that is one of the things we do not associate you with.
Well, Hoffman did not force anything upon you. And what one learned, and what I learned from Hoffman, was the actual handling of space. I mean, he'd set up still life, and we would all draw it, black and white charcoal. And it was merely the tensions within that space, what was happening behind it as the wall moved, this pushed forward and the color came towards you. And that was all what it was about. We were not working in color. I mean, maybe some of the students, but it was basically his big forte and his beauty and his love and his poetry with space. What was happening in space, and I've been doing it ever since.
How do you describe your work? What's the difference between a space, a place, and a dwelling?
Well, that's the most important question. First of all, if you are a Parisian, that's your place. If you're a New Yorker, that's your place. That it's something personal, something meaningful, something that's me. Not something purchased, but it's me. And I think this is where contemporary interiors or interior design or architecture really fails. I think we have lost that sense of craft and being part of the landscape, whether it's in New York or Milwaukee.
What are the greatest lacks in the environments that you see today?
Well, I cannot quite tell the difference between a residence and a showroom and a restaurant. I mean, you walk into...
Other than the marquees and the menus.
Right. Well, I mean, but it's shiny, and it's, it's so showbiz, it's...
Too glossy for your taste.
Very glossy. and it doesn't have a personality. There's nobody there. I have been to an apartment, one of two apartments in the same evening, and both apartments were so similar in furniture, materials, and even the art. I mean, it was really in art. And actually, all you'd have to do is change your clothes. You wouldn't know whether you were in one apartment or the other. Because I think they are lacking in humor and in art, and the art of living.
How involved are your clients?
Well,
and how early on in the process?
From the beginning. I do not take a client unless they really have something that one can have a marriage.
But you have a very unusual way of working. I dare say it is a unique way. You have no staff. How do you get along in that case? For example, who answers the phone? Who posts the mail? Well,
I have an assistant who worked for me at the furniture firm, Brickell, who produces my furniture. She was a draftsman down there, and I think came to the school, I'm not sure. And she works for me half a day as an assistant. She answers the phone and does the few letters. And I have no other employees. My accountant comes once a month, and he does all the checks, and then I have a lawyer.
How do you manage to do that? Do you hire people on a freelance basis?
Exactly. If I need an engineer, I've done 4 houses now, then I'll hire an engineer. If I need an architect, I'll hire an architect. If I need a draftsman, I'll hire a draftsman.
Do you get the best people to work for you in that way?
Oh, yes. People I've used for years. Yes, certainly. But let me just make one point here. I think the most successful thing I do is how I live. I really mean that.
I know.
I mean, I design interiors and furniture and flatware and so forth and so on. But I think the way I live maybe is the most meaningful.
That you've designed a way of life as well.
That's right. Very quiet, very uncomplicated, much time, half the time in the country, a wonderful garden, travel a lot. And all this doesn't mean money, because I've always done it. I mean, when I was 17, I took a year off and bicycled through France and stayed at youth hostels. And just this week, I've had a couple of lectures in San Francisco and Berkeley, and then took 4 days off and stayed in a cabin 3 hours north of San Francisco. Now, most people would rush the hell back to New York, and I won't do that.
How have you managed to continue to free yourself to do more and better work?
Well, I spend 3 or 4 days in the country, and I work, of course. I'm always working.
Wherever you are?
Oh, yes, and I have a kiln in the country, and I do collage out there. And I have 2 studios. I have a place where Therese works in New York at the Dakota, and then I have several other rooms where I can do my personal thinking, where I can take a chair and bring it there, no phone, or a piece of flatware, or a glass, or a dish, or some new fabric, and where I can be very quiet and cut off.
Let's take this chair for a moment, your university chair that you designed, I guess, in the mid-1970s.
Well, this is an interesting chair in the sense that I had a call from Bill Hammond, who was our Dallas rep, who sells our furniture in Dallas, and he was then working on the Johnson Library. And he said that the president really would like an all-wood chair. And amusingly enough, he said he'd like it sort of between a barroom chair and a courtroom chair and a little bit of a Western saddle.
How do you design? Do you start with models or drawings? How does that work?
Well, I designed a chair by starting with a chair. Any chair. I mean, it can be a bentwood chair or an 18th century French chair. And the only thing I'm interested in is the pitch. It's the back, the lower lumbar. I might cut the arms off, I might cut the legs off, put it on a box. I want to be able to sit in it. So I'll start with that pitch, which is easy to find. I mean, you could do it, well, it's easier if you can eliminate the arms and legs. And so starting with that pitch, I then will work with muslin and a staple gun with cardboard I mean, say, for instance, I wanted to make this into a high-back chair. I would take a couple of strong photographic clips and take a huge piece of cardboard and clip it on here, and then I would start drawing it to get the shape.
Right on the cardboard.
Right on the cardboard. Then
So in a sense, you sculpt the chair.
Exactly. Well, it's actually what it is. It's an armature. It's no different than sculpture, or even making dresses.
Well, that also explains, I guess, your best-known chair, where the armature is literally exposed to the observer.
Well, I love the skeleton showing. I mean, I really like chairs that show everything, the total skeleton.
You are obviously a very influential teacher. You've taught at Yale and at Pratt and over many a dinner table. I wonder if, and many of your students actually have come here and described your influence on them. I wonder if there is any way that they have influenced you.
Oh, you'll never stop learning. And you can see someone doing something. I mean, I was working on a new table with a draftsman, and she's a student. She's not finished with school yet. She's only working part-time. That's down at the studio at Burkell. And she came up with something this week that I couldn't quite figure out. And now, I'm not saying that's the answer, but certainly I could. Hoffman always said that. Hoffman got more from his students than the students got from him. And I believe that's true.
Do you feel the same way?
Oh, yes, of course. You never know where that lovely little inspiration will come out. I remember some housewives, really, in an evening class here a couple of years ago. I was a critic. Michael Khalil was the teacher. And I couldn't believe such beautiful work by women who had never studied before in their lives, who had raised their children, and they were doing houses. You know, and it was thrilling. It was really exciting, and I learned a great deal from it, of course.
You've said, I strongly disagree with and disapprove of most people who are doing interiors today. Can you elaborate on that? You're so non-judgmental on the one hand, on the other. You have such strong views. What is it that you disapprove of so strongly?
It's all fashion now. It's sort of clever, and and you do exactly. I mean, like all of a sudden, the colors the last 5 years all became pastel. It was fashions, the same as the dress business.
As I recall, some of that fashion has a tiny bit affected you as well, because you have developed a new line of textiles that have some of the most beautiful colors imaginable. And they are pastels.
Well, not all pastels, but
some of them are.
Oh, well, indeed. We are in business. I mean, I started... No. I started in business.
I accept that. I understand.
My furniture is to be sold. You know, I mean, there are pieces of furniture that I like that simply does not sell. My favorites, as a matter of fact.
What is your favorite?
Well, it would be hard to describe them, but there are some that I think it's called a... envelope chair, that does not sell. The H-frame chair does not sell. There's furniture that does not sell. And furniture that I would like to take off the line, but can't because it is selling. So through my years of department store business and being a practical person, giving me my freedom, that if we are working with hundreds and thousands of architects throughout the country, and such fabrics are requested, you see, I mean, we'll make any color any architect wants. I mean, if they'll buy a certain yardage. So then they will submit. Is
there ever an order you rejected because you thought it was an assault on your design?
You're talking about color of fabric now?
Yes.
Oh, no. I don't even know what they're, most of the time, what they might be bringing in for color. But they're not allowed to change furniture. Now, occasionally that occurs. They'll come to me. See, I own the furniture designs. Burkell manufactures them and produces them and takes care of all the monies and sales and all those things that I'm not interested in. The only thing I do is I'm involved with the aesthetics. I work with a firm and on the advertising, on the graphics, and also on the quality control. That's all I am involved in. The aesthetics, the showrooms, and the quality control.
You touch on a point that has interested me. I notice more and more throughout the country, both in homes and in offices, chairs that look like modest and sometimes even cheap, I mean in execution rather than in design, versions of a Ward Bennett chair. And then when you look, sometimes you need not look a second time to know that it is not a Ward Bennett chair. But how is all that possible? How can they copy that chair and literally, I guess there's no better word to describe it than the rip-off of the Ward Bennett chair. Do you have any protection of your design? You just said you own that chair.
No, I own the designs in the sense that I get a royalty on the designs. But
does that mean it is patented?
If they stop, no, it isn't patented at all. You cannot patent a design. You can patent a zipper. You can patent some sort of closing, but you cannot patent a shape.
And what is the thinking behind that?
I don't know. I mean, they've been trying to do this, I mean, get through the courts. Well, Tiffany made a design of mine, and it turned out to be too expensive. That was in silver. And I think they produced 100 place settings. 6 months later, the vice president, then Vice President George O'Brien, sent me a letter with a full-page ad of my silver, my Tiffany silver, and being produced in stainless by a firm called Supreme Cutlery. Well, I called them, and naturally I got no response whatsoever. I had my lawyer write them a letter, and it also occurred. Well, 6 months later, again, I wrote them a letter to this Mr. Jules Rosenberg, and I said, if you ever wanted an original design and you didn't want to knock off somebody else's, why did you get in touch with me? And these are the people who now produce my stainless steel flatware.
Happy ending. Nice.
I just signed another contract for another 3 years for 3 more place settings.
3 more designs.
That's right. Well, it is a paradox, though. There aren't agents for designers, such as there are agents for writers, for playwrights, and for many other professions.
How do you explain that?
I don't understand it.
Is there anything you haven't designed yet that you'd like to?
Well, I'm just working on people now.
You were asked to design a special chair for a very top executive, one David Rockefeller. What were the circumstances of that design, and what was his request?
Well, I was hired by David Rockefeller when One Chase Manhattan Plaza was built, now 18, 19 years ago, as a consultant. But I did design that particular desk chair for David Rockefeller.
What does it look like?
Well, it has a very good lumbar support. It really is he also had a very difficult back and had a ski accident, I think. And so it was good high back where he could rest his head, and it had a very good lower lumbar support. And it did also have some movement in it, some mechanical movement in the chair.
Do you use medical and research in designing a chair as well for, what is considered the most comfortable position and the most therapeutic as well?
Sure. Well, first of all, I did have a back problem and still do. But I really worked for a long time and was around a long time. Kennedy's doctor, Dr. Janet Travell, when my back really first went out. And it was through her, working with her, that I developed my first chair. Because there wasn't a chair on the market that she considered comfortable other than the rocking chair that she prescribed for Dr.
And which chair was that?
Which was my first?
Yes.
Gee, I don't remember now.
You're among the first designers to employ industrial materials in residential designs. How'd you begin to do that?
Oh, well, they're so beautiful.
Which ones among them?
Well, I think Corbusier once described the best American architecture as being the silos and the industrial buildings, the dams in America. And so anything that's made, such as this camera here, innately, every joint, every screw, the way it moves and the connection and the strength, that's innately beautiful.
I thought you were paying attention to our conversation, and all the while you're examining the design that surrounds you.
Well, it's my profession.
Is there still a standard, or at least a rigid standard, of what's in and what's out? Maybe
well,
easier.
In a sense, but good taste is sort of so dictated by the Diana Vreelands in life, of what I mean, that you have to wear this or you have to wear that to make, and be short and fat and everything is tight. And I mean, wearing Calvin Klein dresses that don't fit you. So I think that this business of taste is something to question. I think people should develop their own taste. And I think through education, and really working on it. I mean, studying and go to the museums. I mean, not just as what museums have become, I mean, just something to do with like going to the movies. I mean, really understand our heritage and that whatever you have is truly meaningful to you, that you just haven't bought some bric-a-brac. And most homes are just full of things that are meaningless.
Well, despite your youthful appearance, it's been more than 50 years since you were with that handcart on the corner of 33rd Street. And very happily, everything you've explored appears to be not only a great success for you, but gratifying as well. And it has influenced the way you live and work. Has it created any barriers and problems as well?
Oh, my life is very simple. I have everything I want. I mean, materially, and I want very little. I love to travel, and well, there was a statement that George O'Keeffe made to me recently. I happily had 4 hours with her, and fantastic lady, almost blind and 89 or something, and we had many friends in common in the past. And then in leaving, she said to me, "You know what, there's only one thing that matters, only one, and is it interesting?"
Well, you've made certain that one thing came true this evening. Thank you, Ward Bennett, for being with us tonight, and thank you, audience, for being with us as well. I'm Barbara Lee Diamonstein for Interior Design, The New Freedom. Thank you, Ward.
Is it all right?